title of our paper is a media architecture approach for designing next generation of urban interfaces. The past 20 years has seen the emergence and consolidation of the field of media architecture, which essentially investigates the use of digital technologies in cities, in the built environment, and its impact to public spaces and to urban communities. It sort of evolved from architectural illumination in the beginning, and then as technology became more affordable, it expanded to public displays, large-scale media facades, smart infrastructure, standalone light installations, and then we have all these becoming interactive over the years. And more recently, we've seen also new technologies such as augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and robotics coming into the mix. There are two key aspects of media architecture which we believe are beneficial to inform new urban interfaces. The first one being its inherent multidisciplinary nature. Projects in media architecture often involve a range of skill sets that go way beyond the traditional skill sets of an architect. Software developers, engineers, urban planners, and others are often part of the projects. And it also involves a wide range of stakeholders that go all the way from public to the general public to public governments and private organizations. So when it comes to address those new technologies that they are being now involved in new projects, the question that we pose is how much of the knowledge that has been gathered in the past 20 years and the challenges that have been identified are still applicable and could inform those new designs. And what are the new challenges that are now being posed by those new technologies, and what are the new forms that we can use to prototype those new scenarios? So we identified two main challenges that we discussed in our paper. The first one being this emergence of concerns about the environment and sustainable practices in the field of interaction design. So interactive technologies are play on this contradiction of sorts that they, on one hand, they can drive public interaction and raise awareness about societal topics and promote more sustainable lifestyles. But on the other hand, they still rely on technologies that are often wasteful and promote detrimental effects in cities, right? So when we consider those new technologies and these new scenarios, are they going to make the problem worse, or can we harness them to support the enhancement of our approaches towards sustainability and the more than human agents that we should also care for? And the second challenge that we identified is this increase in automation that's pervasive in cities today, and the proliferation of urban robots, which are intelligent, autonomous, non-human agents. So when they also start to become and play a role, become a part of the city, and the new services and new challenges and risks, but also opportunities that emerge out of that, how can we take all that into account? How can we design for it, for the better of humanity, and how can we prototype for those new scenarios? So in an attempt to answer all those questions, we developed three case studies that we presented in the paper, and I will now invite my co-authors to expand on them. So I believe Linda is going to be the first one to talk about.
Yes, thank you. So as Luke already mentioned, there are different kind of challenges, and a huge topic is also the sustainability of cities and urban interaction design. And one of the big topics in this context is also like air pollution or light pollution, and a lot of topics that really tackle also human psychological and mental well-being. And with this design strategy that I'm presenting right now, we're trying to tackle a little bit of both. On the one hand, to reduce things like light pollution, but also or by augmenting existing materials and structures. And that is where we looked into what is already out there in the urban environment. So we were looking into particularly traces of use as a design strategy, as you see here on the left picture. So this is a slide on a playground, basically, where you can really see where people grabbed the rail. And this is things that are recognizable on the one hand, ubiquitous, but also still seamlessly embedding in the environment. And this is where we thought, okay, maybe we can take this as a design strategy to design the interfaces in a way that they embed into the environment without making too much of an explicitness, but on the other hand, also still be natural in a way. And this is then where we used a material which is concrete on the right side here and try to design interfaces using the strategy, and also tested it in a lab study. and made it also interactive. So the concrete can make interactive and it's into a capacitive touch interface. Exploring the design strategy of how this is understandable and also usable for potential users and in the outdoor context. And we did, so right now this is still an exploratory status where we can see that, so one of the big challenges here, if we reuse existing materials and structures, is also a lot of demand for the users to change their mental model and expectations. So this is one of the questions that derive from this. So how can we do that properly? Another question that's also outstanding is then like the whole design space. So what is the potential of capacitive concrete? There are some use cases out there already, but there is also much more potential how we can redesign existing structures. And lastly, it's also the question of how to balance what is the right balance between explicitness and embeddedness. And I think this is where we can go to the next case study already with Woodie, the urban robot presented by Marius.
Yes, thanks, Linda. Another project that we are discussing in our article is Woodie. Woodie is a slow-moving robot that draws with conventional chalk sticks on the ground and uses the ground, so the street, as a large horizontal canvas. And similar to traces of use, we were interested how to use existing infrastructure of physical structures without making permanent changes to the place, and also how to augment places. And we deployed Woodie for 3 weeks in a public festival. And we were also interested as another aspect, apart from displaying content through chalk, about the interaction between people and these new entities in public space, robots. So as you can see on the images as well, there was also a low resolution lighting display integrated into the robot to communicate with passersby. And in this evaluation over 3 weeks, we could observe that people were often standing around Woodie, similar to a street performer. And Woodie also often triggered a honeypot effect, which means that more people are approaching the robot if other people are standing around already. And that's something that was also previously observed for public displays. So I think next is Beat with his project.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So what we can observe, what Marius and Linda already mentioned, is that we can observe that more self-learning systems enter the urban spaces. And this could be, for example, autonomous vehicles, but also urban robots such as Woodie. And therefore, we as designers and media architects have to also think about and consider interaction patterns with intelligent technologies in the urban context. And this is especially important since the interaction with intelligent technologies is different from like other technologies, which are more deterministic. Another special aspect in the urban context is that we have to challenge that different cultures meet and age groups and context meets. And the question is, how can we design interaction paradigms which are understandable for all of them? So what we did in our project is that we look into the social interaction with robots, and especially in this kind of context of teaching machines and training machines, we can observe that a lot of the HRI research has been like considering punishment as a teaching strategy. And this is quite interesting since it connects to the Traces of Use project. So what we were like interested in is like how the interaction with these kind of social robots change if we integrate more lasting and damaging interactions. So in our context, we looked into how scolding and also dazzling a robot, but also like destroying the robot changes this kind of relation between human and technology in the urban context. So we conducted a study in which like 20 participants had to train a robot and use punishment techniques to do so. And we saw that this kind of punishment had a real hard impact on the participants. So they were really affected by that. And especially this kind of irreversible interaction where they did like a lasting change to the system was quite meaningful to them. So what we observed is that this kind of anthropomorphic design, which was implemented here, is quite meaningful to the participants. And the question which arises is, should this kind of interaction something which we consider in the urban context and in the media architecture context? And so we want to discuss or like open up the discussion regarding two questions. So can such socially ostracized interaction with artificial interfaces maybe even prevent excessive and unreflected behavior patterns, since, for example, the abuse of technology and misuse of robots is maybe not so attractive anymore? And the other question is if we maybe should totally change our thinking about designing for urban robots in the context of cities, and do not use anthropomorphic design strategies at all, and maybe look for new design strategies. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks to my co-authors. To summarize what we've just heard, we can see and observe that the field of media architecture, where we did a lot of work in the past years, is shifting. So there's a shift happening first, as we've discussed already, and also discussed in the paper. There's a shift from rather static applications that are on buildings and on the facade of buildings now to autonomous systems. And with the global change situation due to the pandemic, we can also observe that the behavior of the people and the perception of new technologies and the perception towards more digital advancements in the city has also changed, and there's a new openness to that. And we can see now a radical shift happening with, for example, large companies deploying autonomous systems. We can see that autonomous cars will be on the streets of the future city in the very, very near future. Is already happening right now. The question really that we want to state is, can we do something about it? And can we probably design also co-design processes where the citizens of the city can participate in the design process and help to make the future of the urban environment more meaningful, more human, and probably more enjoyable. So we are a bit critical that we should leave these questions up to the big technology companies that will do their own design anyway. But the question is that we want to raise: how can we co-design those systems together? And in the paper, we've outlined a couple of research questions that are divided into different topics and that are raising different questions. They are not answering the questions right now, but we consider them as ideal starting points where we in our domain and in our research community could actually have the research agenda for the next years at hand. So just to name a few, we mentioned in the paper that the interdisciplinary team collaboration is one of the key challenges that's crucial here, because there's, on the one side, the whole context is highly technical, but on the other side, also, as the co-authors mentioned, human, social, and ethical design consideration play together in this field. So we have to partner and team up with engineering disciplines. We have to team up with social sciences. And we, as media architecture practitioners and researchers, see media architecture as like a mediator discipline that could practically manage and leverage all these different streams and different opinions on future technologies. And we think that even with environmental changes, we think that there's a pressing, even more pressing need to do this in a very timely manner. And therefore, we want to dive into this topic and provide our research contribution from the paper as a starting point. So thank you for your time. More information.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is there anyone that has a question?
Carlo, I may have a It's a very specific and technical question, but maybe if it's appropriate, of course, the authors will, I'll leave it up to you, okay, if it's okay to address it. I completely agree with your last statement. I think this is clearly one of the main issues. We have to, not just in your area, media architects and researchers, as most of us that are working with technology. In my situation, it's human communication and information sharing and so on. But there's a technical issue when you get into the artificial intelligence area and try to put that into your designs. And of course, having in agenda the human and social priority. When it gets two of your case, by the way, I loved Linda's presentation and her part of the work, okay, but this is more technical and it's related to artificial intelligence. It doesn't mean that part isn't extremely innovative and interesting, okay, Linda. So concerning AI, we noticed by your use cases that a specific public or a general public is extremely important to engage with your designs. Considering this is so, of course, by definition, we know people are completely unpredictable in terms of behavior. How do you set up your artifacts? Okay, let's call them like this. We saw the last one that had to do with the Punishable AI. I had never seen the concept, marvelous. But how do you set up your artifacts? How do you get the training sets to really cope with that unpredictable interaction that humans can have with your artifacts? Okay, how do you set up? I know they learn, of course, a long time. That's one of the definitions of AI engine, but the setting up, the training of the artifacts to really cope with those unpredictable patterns. How do you do it? If it's okay to address this question, I know it's very technical, and we use conversational systems, and we have that problem. That's why I'm asking if you are able of sharing that experience with us.
So I think it's mainly about the speculative character of the project. So maybe it's not so clear based on my talk, but we're not really interested in implementing this kind of punishment in real technology for the urban context. We're rather raising the question, should we do something like that? Mm-hmm. And also this project should raise the question, should we maybe consider other ways? And it's so interesting because when we look into the interaction design with AI, we see this kind of anthropomorphic design strategy all around us, like talking to Siri and so on. Mm-hmm. But I think we think not enough about the consequences about that. Because if we consider technology to be human or human-like, how does this change the human-technology relation? So I think maybe the end goal is not to actually implement it, but to learn something about it. So it's not something I would like implement in the next years, not in the next 20 years and later, but rather think, where could this pattern of thought lead us in the design of urban interfaces? So in our case, because you asked this technical question, we didn't implement it in this kind of really deep technical way. It was rather like a Wizard of Oz setup where the people thought it's going to work. And we had some kind of effects implemented, but they were rather like on a random pattern, okay, to make them believe the technology is actually working. And obviously the people were also like informed about how to interact with that. And this is like the other point, how to actually communicate it effectively in the city or urban context. And I guess this is like something where we have this connection point to Linda's project. So seeing these kind of traces on machines or technology can inform possible interaction patterns. So if we would see damaging technology becomes like an interaction option. So this is like more about the interaction design.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I have also a question for you. I have the impression from your presentation and also for the answer you gave to the Oscar question that the people is there, but in some sense they are somewhat in the background, behind the stage. So the technologies appear at least, you appear at least more concerned about the technology. Of course, you have the interaction with the people, but the main attention for the moment seems on the technologies. So I would like to ask you if you can provide us more hint about the human side. I mean, the reaction of the people, and also how you foresee in your claim, a claim that you insert in your conclusion. So to enable citizens to deal better with the contemporary global challenges. If you can provide us some hints. And also, how you expect the citizen to modify their behaviors in the future? I mean, which new attitude or literacies you expect they have to develop to take the maximum advantage of the next generation of urban interfaces?
Yeah, this is, I guess your question is also related to the project that Marius was carrying out. So we consider those urban probes, and we call it urban prototyping, of having those micro placements of new technology in the urban environment, and then having it exposed over longer time spans. So there we can actually study and investigate the reactions from the people towards new technology, and then adapt our prototypes. So I think the design process should be like that we involve participants with technology probes on different locations, draw our conclusions, modify the probes, and then actually derive our future design concepts from that, because it's very difficult to prototype in the urban environment, because every situation is different and unique, and every kind of city has their own rituals and habits and mentalities. So I think the adoption of technology has to happen in the context with the citizens together. Maybe Marius, you can add on.
Yeah, I can quickly jump in. Also a bit related to the first question, maybe. So, for example, with Woodie, we completely remote controlled the robot, and that's also a technique that is often used in human-robot interaction, where it's more about the interactions with an artifact, similar to what Beat mentioned as well. So we remote controlled the robot, but people expected it's behaving autonomously. And then what Alexander mentioned already, so we had this first, we used Woodie as an urban probe in this context, and then we further iterated on it and deployed it again in another context. So for example, in the first evaluation, we found out that people have this like emotional relationship to the robot, in a way, like that they would come and hug the robot, particularly children, although the robot was not not having any humanoid kind of features. So in the next step, we designed some emotional expressions for the robot, where the robot could actually, through the movement, really implicit, and through the light patterns, communicate. And I think that's also the step of urban prototyping. And of course, it's also difficult to predict what will happen if we have a lot of these robots in urban spaces. So because it's still something quite new. So yeah, from there's of course also this novelty effect often in our field if we deploy an artifact in public space. So yeah, it's also difficult to foresee what's next. What is maybe also interesting to think about, and I think that's also something we want to raise in the papers and the article as well, is who will deploy these urban robots? Will it centralized by government, by a company, or is there also like some sort of like do-it-yourself DIY movement from a community? Do we have community deployed robots and so on? And that's also something we want to test with this less mundane kind of urban robotic probes. Yeah.
If I can add a point to that, if we still have time for it, and staying on the Woodie case study, Carlo, you asked about the expectation of people changing behavior and as a consequence of those deployments. That actually what we observed during this particular deployment. It was installed on a laneway here in Sydney for 4 weeks. And while the robot was drawing figures with chalk on the ground, we observed night after night people taking that as a license for also to go and to pick up a piece of chalk and start drawing on the pavement. and then eventually got large groups of people actually collaborating, strangers even, starting to collaborate with drawings on the floor. And every night we would get this tapestry of drawings made by people that felt an excuse to behave as such because of the presence of this autonomous or semi-autonomous robotic agent on the street, at the street level. So the change on the expectations for public behavior that we observed, I think it's a very interesting case study that could inform future design and therefore encourage particular types of behavior by what's often referred as urban acupuncture, right? So you make an intervention, it's a very situated intervention, but that kind of ripples out and provide a change on the tacit norms of public behavior and expectations for those behaviors that have repercussions for the broader city life.